"Get out, trash!" Sterling Blackwood's voice cracked through the marble air of the Concord Degans Gala like a whip. His manicured hands slammed into Mason Harris's shoulders. 16, black, slender, her oil-stained coveralls a stark contrast to the glittering gowns around her. The force sent her stumbling backward, breath hitching as her grip loosened. Her grease-stained leather notebook, her father Calvin Harris's legacy, filled with sketches and handwritten formulas of engines that roared like poetry, spun from her hands and struck the ornate fountain with a splash that silenced the room. 40 pages of brilliance floated, curling and disintegrating under the glow of chandeliers. Sterling sneered, pulling out a miette tau, monogrammed silk handkerchief, to wipe his hands as if scrubbing off contamination. "Security, get this filth away from my Bugatti before I call the police." 200 of the city's elite froze mid-toast, faces caught between fascination and discomfort. Crystal glasses trembled. iPhones gleamed like tiny witnesses. The 10,000 a plate charity gala had just turned into a public execution of dignity. Behind the wrought iron gates, Keisha Harris, Mason's 13-year-old sister, screamed, "That's our dad's notebook! Give it back!" She darted forward, but a security guard yanked her arm, treating her like a criminal. Mason A.'s heart tore at the sound. Kesha S.'s cry was her father. S.'s voice, all over again, desperate and proud. Sterling turned, feeding on the audience's silence. "This is what happens when do-gooders invite them near civilization," he announced, voice rich with venom. "They don't want help. They want to steal. Look at this creature." That word, creature, hit harder than his shove. Mason's jaw tightened. Her brown skin glistened with sweat and humiliation. Her curls, once tied back neatly, had loosened, sticking to her cheeks. She wanted to scream, but the words sat like molten iron in her chest. No one moved. Not one of those shimmering dresses or tuxedos stepped forward. "Tell me, girl," Sterling mocked, pacing in circles like a prosecutor before a jury. "What kind of parents raise a beggar who touches a $40 million automobile? Oh, wait." His smile sharpened. "No parents at all." A ripple of cruel laughter moved through the crowd. Then a voice cut through it. "Sir," said Mike Coleman, the security guard who had earlier let Mason through the gate. His stance was firm, his voice respectful, but edged with defiance. She wasn't stealing. She was trying to help with the engine. Sterling's laugh was cold and surgical. "A homeless black girl thinks she can fix a Bugatti?" He raised his hands to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, forget MIT, forget Ferrari's engineers. Apparently our next master mechanic lives under a bridge." Scattered laughter followed, nervous, guilty, vile. Mason's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She could still smell the gasoline on her hands from when she leaned over that engine earlier. Her father's design, his touch, his science. That Bugatti wasn't just a car. It was the same model Calvin Harris had once helped restore before Sterling stole the credit. And now his daughter stood humiliated before the same man who erased her father's name. The gala's opulence blurred around her. The world shrank to Sterling's smirk and the sound of papers dissolving in the fountain. Mason's fists clenched. The humiliation burned, but beneath it something older, stronger, unbreakable began to rise. This wasn't the end of Calvin Harris's legacy. This was the beginning of hers. Sterling Blackwood had promised spectacle, not failure. $50,000 to whoever revives my Atlantic in 60 minutes, he'd announced earlier, waving his checkbook like a king tossing scraps to the crowd. The guests had roared with amusement, expecting a harmless show. Rich men fumbling with tools. A humble victory by Sterling's own mechanic, Gary Wilson, just before the timer struck 0. But now, 40 minutes in, the Bugatti sat dead and defiant under crystal chandeliers. Every failed attempt tightened the noose around Sterling's ego. His jaw pulsed, his reputation bleeding out before hundreds of lenses. From beyond the iron gates, Mason Harris had seen it coming. The misfires, the futile fuel checks, the rising panic. She'd studied those same symptoms in her father's worn notebook years ago. Vapor lock. A flaw in the Atlantic's pressurized fuel system. She could see the solution like a map etched in her mind. Every annotation Calvin Harris had left behind flickering like a ghost over the engine. She'd pressed against the gate, heart hammering. I can fix it. And Mike Coleman, the only man on the payroll with a conscience, had seen that fire in her eyes. He'd made a quiet decision that would later cost him everything. One shot, kid. Don't waste it. Now Mason stood in the glare of chandeliers, her father's notes dissolving in the fountain behind her, her chance at redemption dripping away like ink in water. Baby, cooed. Vivian Devereux. Sterling's girlfriend. 3 million followers, a dress worth more than Mason's life. Her phone streamed the chaos live, the viewer count climbing like wildfire. Maybe we should just hear her out. Sterling didn't blink. No. I want everyone to witness what happens when people forget their place. He stepped forward, Italian leather whispering against marble until he stood inches from Mason's torn sneakers. You think poverty makes you special? His voice slithered. You think desperation equals talent? Let me educate you. There are creators, builders, people who matter. He leaned closer, his breath sharp with champagne. And then there are parasites like you. The crowd tensed. No one looked away. Vivian's live comments exploded with fury, half calling him a monster, half cheering for drama. In the fountain, the last pages of her father's notebook melted. 15 years of genius erased in seconds. The schematics for pressure stabilization, the annotated diagrams, all fading into nothing. His final note bled into blue ripples. Broken things can be fixed. Broken people can too. Something inside Mason didn't shatter. It solidified. Her trembling stopped. Her spine straightened. My father, she said, voice calm but cutting, was Calvin Harris, master mechanic. He restored that Bugatti 15 years ago before you framed him for embezzlement to hide your charity fraud. The courtyard went silent. Gasps echoed. Even Gary Wilson froze mid-motion, his face drained of color. That name, Calvin Harris, was a ghost no one wanted raised. Sterling blinked, the mask slipping. Shock, rage, panic, then calculation. You're a liar, he hissed. The engine won't start because of vapor lock, Mason interrupted, stepping closer. Her voice sliced through the air. Pressurized fuel system. Temperature differential creates vapor bubbles that block flow. My father documented the fix. Takes 12 minutes. I can do it in 8. The crowd held its breath. For 3 eternal seconds, the night paused. Then Sterling smirked. Predator reborn. Fine. Prove it, street rat. You've got 10 minutes. Mason turned toward the Bugatti. The sea of silk and arrogance parted like she carried a disease. Cameras followed every step. She dropped to her knees beside the car and instead of opening the hood, went for the trunk. A wave of confused murmurs rolled through the onlookers. Gary Wilson frowned. Kid, the engine's in the front, he muttered. Mason didn't look up. That's why everyone failed? The trunk, Mason said, voice low but certain, is where my father hid his emergency toolkit 15 years ago. Gasps rippled through the courtyard. Every camera phone turned. Her fingers moved along the felt lining like she was performing surgery, steady, reverent, unshakable. Then she felt it, a subtle ridge, a seam that shouldn't exist. With a firm tug, a hidden panel clicked free. The crowd leaned forward as Mason lifted a leather pouch, aged but immaculate, wrapped in a protective cloth. Vivian's live stream comments detonated. What's in there? How'd she know? Her viewer count shot past 120,000, a digital wildfire. Mason unwrapped it. Inside lay a custom fuel pressure gauge, a handmade vapor release valve, and a handwritten card in her father's unmistakable scrawl. For the day they realize they need you, Dad. Her hands trembled. Her throat tightened. He knew. Somehow Calvin Harris had known this moment would come, when his daughter would be standing in front of the same car, the same man, fighting the same war. Sterling's smirk faltered. That's my property. Anything inside that? This toolkit was installed in 2010, Mason cut in, voice sharpened to steel. 6 months before you fired my father, before you erased him. She held the gauge high, brass gleaming under the spotlights. This is the only tool that can diagnose vapor lock in the Atlantic series. Your high-priced mechanics don't have one because my father invented it. Gary Wilson's face drained of color. He'd seen that tool before, seen Calvin use it like magic, and the truth hit him like a gut punch. The digital timer glared. 9:42. In searing red, Sterling's jaw ticked. Fine, you've got your little toys, but you still have to fix the car, street rat, and when you fail, and you will fail, I'm having you arrested for theft. Mason met his stare, unflinching. When I succeed, you pay $50,000. In front of everyone. On camera. Sterling grinned. And when you fail, you'll apologize to every person here. On your knees. The crowd gasped. Even Vivian's chat turned, calling Sterling a monster. From behind the gates, Keisha's voice cracked. Don't do it, Mason! He's trying to humiliate you! Mason looked at the toolkit, at the Bugatti, at the man who'd destroyed her father. Then she straightened her shoulders. Deal! The timer flashed. 09. She popped the Bugatti's hood. The engine gleamed, a cathedral of pre-war precision. Dual overhead camshafts, polished aluminum manifolds, hand-machined valves that reflected her face back in distorted light. Her father's fingerprints lived in this metal. Her hands moved on instinct. Memory, inheritance, defiance. Primary fuel pump, normal. Secondary line, normal. Then her fingers paused on the pressurized feed line to the carburetor. Temperature variance. Too high. She murmured to herself, temperature differential. There's your culprit. Out came the custom pressure gauge. Brass and copper glinting like an artifact of rebellion. From 10 feet away, Gary Wilson watched, his guilt tightening every muscle in his jaw. When Mason reached for the line connection, he stepped forward with a wrench. You'll need this, he said flatly. Custom fitting. Mason took it automatically, but the moment she felt its weight, something was off. A 7/16 wrench. The Atlantic series used 11mm metric. This wasn't help, it was sabotage. Their eyes met. One heartbeat of silence, understanding sharp as a blade. Thanks, Mason said softly, setting the wrong wrench aside. But I'll use my own tools. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a bent coat hanger. Straightened and filed to a perfect taper, her father's old trick for resetting blocked valves. The crowd murmured, half mocking, half mesmerized. Vivian whispered to her phone, "She's really doing this." Mason exhaled once, then went to war with steel. The courtyard buzzed, a mix of derision, curiosity, and awe. Vivian's live stream chat went nuclear. A coat hanger? She's insane. Viewer count ticked up, 0755 on the timer. Mason slid the makeshift tool into the pressure release valve, fingers precise, guided by memory. Her father's voice whispered through her thoughts. Expensive tools impress people. Simple tools solve problems. Click. The valve released. A steady hiss of pressurized vapor escaped, not explosive, but meaningful. Mason connected the pressure gauge to the diagnostic port. The needle shot to 85 psi, nearly 3 times normal. "Vapor lock confirmed," she announced, voice carrying over murmurs and gasps. Fuel system's been building pressure all evening. Electrically, everything checks out. Mechanically, it's choking itself. A sharply dressed businessman leaned toward his companion, whispering, "How does a homeless girl know this?" Because my father was a master, Mason thought, but she remained silent, eyes fixed on her task. 0712 remaining. From the edge of the crowd, Kesha Harris, 12, squeezed past security. Breathless, determined, she handed Mason a tattered bundle. Mason unwrapped it to reveal their father's old toolbox, dented, scratched, stenciled with C. Harris. She'd thought it lost forever. "I hid it," Kesha whispered, tears glinting. "After Dad died, I knew you'd need it someday." Inside, the fuel pressure regulator adapter their father had machined himself, the exact tool Mason required. The crowd's energy shifted, some faces softened, seeing two homeless girls clutching memory and legacy. Others remained skeptical, waiting for failure. Sterling Blackwood's smirk vanished. His phone glowed red with furious texts. Concern flickered across his face, then alarm. 6:38 on the clock. Mason attached the adapter to the fuel system. Now came the delicate part, bleeding the vapor lock without flooding the carburetor. Too fast, fuel would cascade. Too slow, the pressure wouldn't equalize. Her hands moved like a choreographed dance from years in her father's garage. 3 turns to open. Wait, close one. Monitor the gauge. Pressure dropped. 85, 72, 58 psi. Gary Wilson edged closer under the guise of observation. A coffee cup tilted. Hot liquid spilled across Mason's toolkit, soaking the blanket, dangerously close to the exposed fuel line. "Oh, God! I'm so sorry!" Gary exclaimed, jumping back. But Mason saw through the act. Deliberate angle, calculated clumsiness, sabotage. "You did this," Mason said, low and precise, meant only for him. "Earlier, you're the reason the engine wouldn't start." Guilt cracked his face. "Kid, I don't—" "Yes, you do." Mason's voice cut like steel. "My father trained you, didn't he? Before Sterling fired him. You know this system. You know exactly how to create a vapor lock that looks like natural failure." 0549 remaining. In the crowd, a man with salt and pepper hair, Vincent Crawford, Sterling's rival, watched intently. His phone had tumbled to marble. Mike Coleman retrieved it discreetly, seeing Crawford's message thread to Gary Wilson from 3 days prior. "Sabotage the Bugatti. Make Sterling look incompetent? 25K. Corporate warfare masked as a gala." Gary had been a hired weapon. Mason ignored the spilled coffee, refocused. Gauge readings, 44, 38, 32 psi. Gary frozen, guilt and fear wearing across his face. She looked at him. "Why?" Her hands steady, heart racing. "Was it worth it? Whatever they paid you?" Gary's voice cracked. "You don't understand." Mason's eyes never left the engine. Gary's confession hung in the air, heavy as oil smoke. "I have aging parents, medical bills," he murmured, voice cracking. "Sterling pays well, but not enough for Hop." He stopped, swallowed. "Vincent Crawford, he offered me money I couldn't refuse, said it was just a prank, make Sterling look bad in front of investors." "A prank that destroys my father's legacy," Mason whispered, letting the words hit hard. The pressure gauge read 28 psi, creeping towards safe territory. She began the repriming sequence, following her father's instructions like a sacred recording in her mind. Prime slowly. Let the fuel find its path. Rushing creates air pockets. 0415 remaining. The engine shuddered, a single sputtering rotation. The crowd leaned forward, phones lifted. Vivian's live stream viewer count exploded to 340,000, a waterfall of disbelief and excitement. Gary took a cautious step back. Shame, dawning realization, fear. He'd underestimated her. This girl, powerless, dismissed, was going to succeed. She was exposing his sabotage by simply fixing what he had broken. Mike Coleman moved decisively, standing between Gary and Mason. No more interference. Sterling's phone buzzed violently. He glanced at the screen. A message from Vincent Crawford. Stop her. Whatever it takes. The deal falls apart if the car starts. Sterling's eyes flicked to the dashboard. Hidden among the vintage gauges was a kill switch, disguised as a diagnostic sensor. One press, and the engine's power would vanish. Instant. Untraceable. 0348 on the timer. Mason primed the fuel system one final time. Gauge reading 22 psi. Perfect. She disconnected her tools, wiped her hands on her soaked jeans, and slid into the driver's seat. 200 people held their collective breath, phones poised, jaws tight. Mason's hand hovered over the original chrome-plated Bugatti starter button, a piece of history she'd seen fired countless times in memory and restoration notes. Sterling's fingers hovered near the kill switch. His body tensed. The choice, his alone. Let the engine roar and admit a homeless girl had outsmarted his mechanics, or cut the power, preserve his empire, save his image. 0321. Remaining. Mason pressed the starter. The engine turned over. A cough, a sputter. Then the Bugatti roared to life, a symphony of 8 cylinders firing in perfect sequence. Exhaust notes cascaded, metallic and alive. The car vibrated with furious beauty, 40 million of history screaming its resurrection into the Beverly Hills night. The crowd erupted, cheers, gasps, applause, rattling chandeliers. Vivian's live stream chat became a frenzied blur of emojis, disbelief, and awe. Mason sat gripping the wheel, tears streaming, heart pounding. Gary Wilson remained frozen, crushed by the weight of his betrayal and the brilliance of her triumph. He'd been paid to sabotage a car. Instead, he'd tried to sabotage a girl who'd just proven herself more capable than he'd ever be. Sterling Blackwood's hand hovered over the kill switch for one awful heartbeat too long. The engine purred like a satisfied predator. He smiled, predatory in a different register now. Congratulations, street rat. Now let's discuss that toolkit you stole from my trunk. Mason climbed out, legs trembling, knees barely holding her. She had resurrected $40 million of history with a coat hanger and her father's stubborn ingenuity. The applause crashed over her like surf. Vivian's live stream had spiked to 520,000 viewers. The chat was a tidal wave. Give her the money. She's a genius. Pay up, Sterling. Sterling stepped forward with theatrical ceremony and produced his checkbook, holding it high for cameras and phones and approval. The courtyard swelled with expectation, the viral moment, the tidy ending they'd all come for. He paused, though, when something in Mason's hand caught his eye. The soggy, water-stained card from Calvin Harris looped in ruined protective cloth. Even damp, the handwriting had an edge Sterling recognized, the tiny flourish on the H, the exact slant Calvin used on his schematics. His expression changed the way fine porcelain cracks. He reached, snatched the card with a thief's precision. "This handwriting," he said, voice cold as cut glass. "Where did you get this toolkit?" "My father," Mason answered, smaller than she felt. The crowd hummed, some puzzled, most confused. But to Sterling, that name was a loaded gun. His face cycled through recollection, then anger, then something far more dangerous, self-preservation. "Calvin Harris, my former head mechanic, the man I fired for embezzlement," Sterling declared smoothly, turning toward the crowd like a practiced actor. "He stole company property. These tools are part of my restoration project. When he was terminated, everything was supposed to be returned. Instead, he kept them and hid them in my car. You used stolen property to deceive us." The cheer faltered. A ripple of uncertainty stole through the guests. Was this a triumph or a theft? Social feeds blinked as comments shifted from celebration to accusation. Mason's stomach dropped cold. The world teetered. "My father didn't steal anything," she said, sharper now despite the quaver. "He built those tools. He invented that pressure gauge because you refused to buy proper equipment. You—" Her voice found steel. "You framed him, took his job, and erased his name." Sterling smiled, terrible and triumphant. "Convenient. Security. Escort them out. Confiscate that toolkit. No payment. And I want those tools seized as evidence of theft." Kesha screamed from the gate. "Don't let him take it! He's lying! He stole from Dad!" She pounded the iron bars until Mike Coleman, face stony, put a calming hand on her shoulder. The sisters' friends in the crowd shifted closer, hands raised in protest. Mike's jaw tightened. For a beat, history and loyalty and fear fought behind his eyes. He'd already seen Vincent Crawford's message thread on his phone. He'd seen Gary's role in the sabotage. He'd watched Mason pull a family legacy back from a fountain. The truth sat heavy in his pocket like a smoking ember. Gary Wilson, pale and collapsing inward, took a step forward as if to speak, but the sound he might make was swallowed by the sudden clamor. Vincent Crawford, at the edge of the courtyard, watched with a face like a man who had miscalculated an entire war. His earlier texts, "Stop her. Whatever it takes," hung invisible in the air between suits and streaming feeds. Vivian's livestream was an electric thing. 500,000 people watching a man try to rewrite a story that had already gone viral. The chat exploded with calls for transparency, for Sterling to pay, for law enforcement to be involved. Though Calvin Harris trended before the night was over. Mason didn't beg. She met Sterling's eyes and, steadier than she felt, said, "If those tools are yours, produce the receipt. Show where the serial numbers match your inventory. Otherwise, you've got a ruined notebook and a man you framed. You can confiscate a damp card, but you can't confiscate the truth." Sterling's smile thinned. He pocketed the card as if hiding an inconvenient witness and raised his voice to the crowd. "Security," he repeated, louder. "Remove them." Mike Coleman stepped forward, not to obey Sterling this time, but to create a buffer. "Sir," he said, tone even, "if you want this handled properly, we call the police and let them decide. No one's leaving with anything until an officer documents it." His eyes flicked to Gary, then to Vincent, then finally to Mason. The message was clear. Public spectacle ends, procedure begins. For a breathless second, everything held. The crowd, the cameras, the soaked little card in Sterling's pocket, Kesha's hands, Gary's broken face, Vincent's cooling fury. Out in the dark beyond the lawn, the city hummed indifferent and expansive. Mason felt something cold and lucid slide into place inside her, loss and fury and a new, dangerous hope. She had resurrected an engine and, in doing so, had pried loose a rot that ran deeper than rust. The battle had just widened. The gala lights would not be enough to bury what she'd uncovered. The courtyard inhaled as one. Vivian's live stream chat detonated. "No, this is wrong. She fixed your car. Pay her." But Sterling's PR machine shifted gears before the outrage could harden into action. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with that practiced warmth, "I apologize for this disruption. We've been deceived by a skilled performance. Theft is theft, no matter how talented the thief appears." Kesha's scream cut through the polish like a raw blade. "You're a liar. You destroyed our dad. You killed him." The 12-year-old's grief ripped the script out of Sterling's mouth. Some guests looked away. Others raised their phones, sensing the story had teeth. Mason stood rooted. She'd fixed the car, proven her skill, fought through sabotage and contempt. And still, Sterling tried to bend the night back to his narrative, because men like him wrote the rules and rewrote history to suit their platforms. "Your father was a thief," Sterling said, low, venom threaded through charm. "And so are you." Orders crackled through Mike Coleman's radio. "Coleman, escort the trespassers off the property. Use force if necessary." The obedient finger hovered over the transmit switch, an easy, career-preserving click to obey the boss and erase the mess. Instead, Mike did something small and seismic. He turned away from the radio and toward Mason, and with steady, unmistakable voice said 5 words that changed the evening. "Tell them what he did." Shock hardened into something like armor in Mason. Her father's memory, those nights bent over metal, that stubborn refusal to accept corruption, slid into her voice. Her words came now not pleading but accusatory, bright as a hammer strike. "My father was no thief," she said. "He was your lead mechanic. He restored this Bugatti from scrap to perfection. When he discovered you were laundering charity auctions, inflating valuations, pocketing donations, you destroyed him." Phones pivoted. Cameras stopped worshiping spectacle and began recording testimony. The crowd shifted, the live feeds reoriented. Sterling's face shifted, colors running through it as stage makeup squealed under real light. "This is slander," Sterling spat. "Security, remove her, now!" Mason didn't waver. She named specifics with a clarity born of grief turned righteous. "You planted false invoices, you forged signatures. You had him arrested knowing the accusation would ruin him, knowing the charges wouldn't stick, but that the allegation alone would destroy his career." Her voice cracked. It was a child's grief made public. "He died believing he was worthless. Our dad died thinking he'd failed us because of your lies." Kesha barreled through the crowd to stand shoulder to shoulder with Mason, mascara streaking, voice iron. "You killed him. Vivian S. viewer count rocketed 890,000. And the chat stopped being a mere circus. People were witnessing something dangerous and real. A privileged man, S. empire being named and accused while 500,000 strangers watched. Sterling laughed, thin, automatic, but it sounded brittle. "Convenient story from desperate children," he said, and tried the weapon of the well-resourced. "I have lawyers. I have documentation. You have nothing but accusations and stolen tools." Gary Wilson, whose guilt had been an ever-present odor since the coffee spill, stepped forward. He was pale, his hands trembling like a man on a cliff. For a moment, no one moved. Then he dug for his phone, fingers that had betrayed a conscience trying to steady themselves. "I have recordings," Gary said, voice raw. 3 days of texts and voice messages. Vincent Crawford, calling, directing sabotage, offering money, telling me to make Sterling look incompetent. A tremor ran through the assembled guests. Vincent Crawford, at the fringe of the crowd, watched his face go ashen. The phone had been dropped earlier. A server had nearly crushed it. Now it became the hinge of truth. Mike Coleman had seen that thread. He'd held the evidence in his hand. "Why?" someone whispered. "Why would they?" Gary swallowed. "They paid me. They told me it was a prank to make Sterling look bad for investors. Vincent put up 25 grand, but it wasn't a joke. He looked at Mason, eyes incandescent with shame. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would cost him his life." Murmurs grew to a roar. Vivian's live stream overlay filled with comments demanding investigation. Hashtags skittered across the bottom of the feed. The gala's polished veneer was cracking into shards. Sterling's smile thinned to a line of danger. He barked for security, for lawyers, for arrests. He reached into his suit pocket. Something legal, something polished. He tried to reclaim control through procedure and money and menace. Mike stepped fully between Mason and Sterling now, radio silent in his other hand. "If anyone wants this handled properly, we call the police," he said, voice flat. "Let them investigate. No one's leaving. No one takes property. Not tonight." Security officers shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their gazes. Others looked for direction. Vincent's men swallowed, glancing at their leader. For the first time in the evening, Sterling's script did not have an obvious page to turn to. The crowd's energy condensed into a single pressure point. Cameras trained on Sterling, on Mason, on Gary, on Vincent. The fountain's ruined pages glittered behind them, impossible evidence of what had been lost and what was being reclaimed. Mason felt the old hollow in her chest fill with something colder and sharper than grief, clarity. She'd come to fix an engine. She'd exposed a rust that ate reputations and lives. The gala would not be the end of this story. Whether through courts, streams, or the court of public opinion, the truth had been pulled into the light. And in that electric, fragile moment, Mason understood the cost and the possibility. She would not kneel. She would not be erased. The battle had widened. The fight for her father's name had become a fight for more than tools. It was a fight for reckoning. Gary held up his phone so the nearest cameras could see every word. He paid me, $25,000, to sabotage the Bugatti, make you look incompetent before Monday's merger vote. The crowd gasped. Vincent Crawford, lurking at the edges, went pale as a ghost. Gary's voice grew firmer, shaking with the weight of confession. But it's not just tonight. Vincent mentioned your other schemes. The charity fraud, inflated valuations. He has proof. Sterling. He's been gathering evidence for months, planning to use it against you. Vincent bolted. Like fire, he tore through the crowd. 2 security guards moved to intercept, but Mike Coleman's voice cut them off. Let him go. FBI will want him later. Sterling's world unraveled in real time. Gary, you're fired. You can't fire me for telling the truth, Gary said. His eyes found Mason. Shock, awe, guilt, and a flicker of admiration mingled there. This kid, she just showed me what real integrity looks like. Risked everything to defend her father's name. I sold mine for money I couldn't even spend without shame. Mason didn't forgive him, not yet. But she gave a small nod. Acknowledgement, not absolution. Seizing the podium microphone, Mason's voice rang clear across the estate. You came here for charity, to feel good about yourselves, to celebrate generosity. But this man, she gestured at Sterling, fury barely restrained, has been stealing from those charities for years. My father died trying to stop him. I'm just finishing what he started. Vivian's live stream hit 1.2 million viewers. The chat became wildfire. News outlets tagged, platforms buzzing, people sharing the feed like it was evidence in real time. A businessman shouted from the crowd, I donated $50,000 to your foundation last year, Sterling. Where did that money go? Others joined. Receipts, investigation, authorities. Sterling looked cornered, an empire unraveling before him. You think this changes anything? Sterling hissed at Mason, venom lacing each word. You're still nobody. Street trash. My lawyers will bury you before breakfast. No, Mason said, unflinching. I'm Calvin Harris's daughter, and that's everything. In the distance, sirens wailed. Red and blue lights flashed through the estate gates. Police? FBI? Someone had clearly called it in. Sterling's hand went to his phone, already dialing his lawyer. The sirens grew louder. Federal agents, dark suits, and unmistakable authority stormed the gates. Lead agent? Sarah Brooks. Mid-40s, steel gray eyes cut through the crowd with practiced precision. Sterling Blackwood, she announced, holding up her badge. FBI, we've been investigating your charitable foundation for 18 months. She glanced at Vivian, still live streaming 1.6 million viewers. Keep that camera rolling. We want this on record. The crowd parted as Sterling's face cycled through denial, rage, and pure survival instinct. He bolted for the Bugatti. I'm leaving. You can't stop me. The engine purred from Mason's repair, $40 million of mechanical history and desperation ready to escape. Mason moved faster. She planted herself directly in front of the chrome grille, arms spread wide. A 16-year-old homeless girl in oil-stained clothes blocking a billionaire's getaway. David versus Goliath, live in Beverly Hills, every phone capturing it. You're not running from my father's work, Mason said. Sterling revved the engine, a threat. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Would he actually risk assault on camera in front of federal agents? Agent Brooks moved toward him, hand near her weapon. "Mr. Blackwood, step out of the vehicle. Now, 3 seconds." Hands gripping the wheel, knuckles white, empire crumbling, choices narrowing, surrender, or vehicular assault broadcast to millions. He chose surrender. Brooks pulled him from the driver's seat. "Sterling Blackwood, you are under arrest for the tax fraud, charity embezzlement, and conspiracy to defraud. We will also investigate a wrongful termination case from 2010 involving Calvin Harris." She turned to Mason. "Your father filed a sealed complaint with our office before he disappeared. We've been waiting years for corroboration. Thanks to tonight, the evidence finally existed." Gary Wilson stepped forward, visibly shaking, and pulled a thick envelope from his jacket. "I have ledgers, emails. Vincent Crawford paid me to sabotage the car, but he also sent documentation about Sterling's fraud as insurance." His voice cracked. "I was going to destroy it, keep my paycheck. But then I looked at Mason. This kid earned clean money tonight. Taught me I can't buy back integrity, but maybe I can start earning it." He handed the envelope to Agent Brooks, then from his wallet pulled out a check, the $25,000 from Vincent. "Dirty money. You earned $50,000 from Sterling. You deserve both." He pressed it into Mason's hands. "I'm sorry, for your father, for being too weak to choose right the first time." The crowd shifted, guilt and inspiration mingling. Phones pinged with donations, $50, $100, $500. Strangers moved, compelled. Vivian addressed her. 1.9 million viewers. "I am starting a GoFundMe for Mason S. Education to honor Calvin Harris' name." The chat exploded with pledges. Sterling, in handcuffs, spat venom. "You think this changes anything? You're still nobody." Mason stepped forward, holding her father's water-damaged card. "No, I'm Calvin Harris's daughter, and that's everything." Agent Brooks handed Mason a business card. "We'll need you to testify, but there's more your father left behind, something we've held in evidence." 3 months later, Mason and Kesha sat in a law office scented with leather and old paper. An attorney, woman in her 60s with kind eyes, slid a manila envelope across the desk. "Your father was careful. He established a safety deposit box in 2010 with instructions. It could only be opened if Sterling Blackwood was convicted of fraud." Mason paused. Last week, the conviction had come through. 12 years on multiple counts. Hands trembling, Mason opened the envelope. Inside, original documents proving Sterling's charity fraud scheme, forged invoices, inflated appraisals, money laundering evidence, and letters, 3 addressed to Mason and Kesha. Their father's handwriting strong and clear. "If you're reading this, I failed to stop him myself, but you can finish it. You have everything you need. My knowledge, my tools, and something Sterling never understood. Integrity can't be destroyed, only inherited." Kesha leaned close as Mason unfolded the letters. Another document revealed that their father co-owned a small garage in East Los Angeles. Though abandoned for 15 years, the deed remained in their father's name, held in trust. The garage was a disaster. Broken windows, rusted equipment, oil stains ingrained in the concrete. But the bones were sound. On the back wall, faded letters. "Harrison and Son, S. Automotive, where broken things get fixed." Mason stood in the dusty workspace, sunlight streaming through gaps. Kesha beside her, equally overwhelmed. "We can do this," Kesha whispered. Mike Coleman appeared in the doorway, no longer in uniform. "I brought cleaning supplies," he said, holding industrial equipment. "Called in favors from the Veterans Network. Volunteers are coming tomorrow." The GoFundMe had exploded. 2.3 million Datsun, from strangers inspired by a homeless girl resurrecting a Bugatti and exposing corruption. Mason used part to renovate the garage, new equipment, proper diagnostic tools, and a classroom space. Showers, quiet rooms for students needing space. She named it Harris Legacy Auto Restoration, second chances for cars and people. Mission, hire homeless youth, teach mechanics, dignity, purpose, everything her father had been denied. Within 2 months, 6 students joined, kids discarded by society, hungry to believe. Mason taught them to read engines like her father did, to see problems as puzzles, to understand broken things could be made whole. Kesha, now 13, enrolled in online business courses to manage operations. The sisters became a perfect team, Mason's hands, Kesha's mind, their father's legacy flowing through both. Gary Wilson offered partnership. Mason studied him, the man who'd sabotaged her, then saved her. Redemption wasn't simple. On probation, she said not forgiveness, but possibility. Vivian's documentary, The Girl Who Fixed Everything, went viral. 30 million views. First week. National news covered it. Mason appeared on morning shows, panels, congressional hearings about homelessness and youth programs. Yet fame felt hollow. One night, restoring a 1965 Mustang, Mason's composure broke. Tools scattered, she sat on the oil-stained floor, sobbing. "Dad, I wish you were here to see this," she whispered. Mike Coleman sat beside her. "He's here, kid. Every time you give a lost kid a chance, every engine you restore, that's him working through you." Mason wiped her eyes. "Fixing the Bugatti didn't bring him back." "No," Mike agreed, but it brought his truth back, his name, his legacy. Gesturing around the garage at students' tools, hope hanging like motor oil mist. "This is bigger than one car, one night, one victory. This is permanent." Mason opened the salvaged, water-stained notebook. Last page, written 3 weeks before her father died. Broken things can be fixed. Broken people can too. Never stop trying. The world will tell you some things are too damaged, too far gone, too expensive to save. The world is wrong. Everything and everyone deserves a second chance. Calvin Harris. Mason traced the words with her finger, feeling her father's presence in the ink. The next day, she attended an auction, not to buy, but to witness. The 1936 Bugatti Type 56S SC Atlantic. Seized as evidence, sold to a Detroit museum for $38 million. Display dedicated to Calvin Harris, master mechanic and unsung hero. Mason watched the car roll away. Not Sterling's trophy, but her father's masterpiece finally recognized. A woman in her 70s approached. "Your father restored my late husband's Corvette in 2009. He taught my son everything. We owe him our family business." 1 year later, Harris Legacy Auto's parking lot overflowed, not with wealth or champagne, but mechanics in coveralls, former students in business casual, community leaders, families touched by second chances. The first annual Second Chance Scholarship Gala. 17 formerly homeless youth presented restored cars, 1968 Camaro, 1955 Thunderbird, testaments to what broken things and people could become. Kesha, 14, addressed 200 guests. "My father used to say every engine has a story, every dent, oil leak, failing part, it all means something. Same is true for people. Our dents don't define us, our repairs do." Mason watched from the side, pride swelling. Kesha continued. "My sister has something to show you." Mason stepped forward as a curtain dropped, revealing a perfect replica of the 1936 Bugatti Type 56S SC Atlantic, built entirely by Harris Legacy youth over 9 months. "This is for every person told they don't belong near beautiful things. You do. You belong everywhere." The replica's engine roared to life on first turn, hand-assembled by formerly homeless teens, proving what broken things and broken people could become. The sound was perfection. The crowd went wild. Gary Wilson, now a full partner in Harris Legacy, stepped forward with a powerful announcement. We've secured partnerships with 6 trade schools across California. Starting next month, we're creating direct pipelines for homeless youth into skilled careers: mechanics, welding, electrical work, real jobs with real futures. Mike Coleman followed, his voice thick with emotion. And I'm officially adopting 2 kids from our program, Marcus and Elena. They're family now. The garage erupted in cheers and tears. Mason wiped her eyes, overwhelmed. Vivian, who had pivoted her platform entirely to social justice content, interviewed Mason for her 3 million followers. What would you say to people facing impossible odds? Mason held up her father's grease-stained notebook, now preserved in a protective case, but always carried. My dad wrote, "Every engine has a solution. You just need the right tools and the courage to try." Same with life. You might not have the fancy tools, you might not look like what people expect, but if you have knowledge, courage, and refusal to quit, you can fix anything. The camera pulled back, capturing the scene. Young mechanics laughing with mentors, families embracing, cars gleaming under industrial lights that had once illuminated only abandonment. Outside, a new face pressed against the garage window. A boy, maybe 15, Latino, clearly homeless. His clothes hung loose, his backpack held together with duct tape. Yet his eyes burned with the same hunger Mason had felt a year ago, the hunger to matter, to belong, to prove the world wrong. Mason noticed him. Always would. She walked outside, extended her hand. "You look lost. Want to learn something?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. Mason smiled, her father's smile, the one that said, "Everyone deserves a chance. First rule, everyone stalls sometimes, but we can fix anything." She led him inside. The Bugatti replica sat center stage. Students gathered around it with pride. The boy's eyes went wide. "You built that?" "We built that," Mason corrected. "And you can too." The camera split screen. Sterling Blackwood, in prison orange, working laundry detail in a federal facility. Mason Harris, guiding a new student's hands as they rebuilt a carburetor, patience flowing from the lessons her father had taught her. Text overlay, Harris legacy. Otto has trained 52 homeless youth. 43 are now employed full-time. Sterling Blackwood serves 12 years for fraud. Calvin Harris's name has been cleared. Mason's voice, a soft whisper meant for her father, meant for everyone. Sometimes the broken things fix us, and sometimes we're exactly what the world needs, right when it thinks we're nothing. The Bugatti replica's engine purred. Perfect, complete, alive. Fate tales of second chances. What's your story? Share below. And if you know someone who needs hope today, tag them. Let's fix what's broken.